Amid the clatter of cutlery and the low murmurs of a busy evening service, Mr. Harris stood at the pass, his eyes sharpened to every detail, his posture rigid with the weight of his world. His fingers drummed a staccato rhythm on the stainless steel countertop, betraying the storm brewing within. Each chime of the reservation bell was a reminder of the staffing issues gnawing at the edges of his already frayed attention. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice sliced through the din, a velvet hammer demanding notice. She held up a wine glass, scrutinizing it against the light, the offending smudge glaring back at her. "This won't do." "Vic, we're slammed," Justin replied, his tone a blend of exasperation and weary patience, hands never pausing in their dance of pouring and mixing. "It's barely noticeable." Mr. Harris's gaze shifted from the chaos of the dining floor to the discord simmering by the bar. Victoria, with her unyielding standards, had become an unexpected keystone in the precarious arch of his staff. Her pursuit of perfection was admirable, yet in moments like these, a thorn in his side. "Every detail is a reflection of us," she insisted, her voice firm but not unkind, a juxtaposition to the tension that tightened her jaw. "Look around, Vic. Customers are happy, orders are flowing. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill," Justin countered, his attempt at levity falling flat in the thick air. Mr. Harris exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him like the last whispers of a dream upon waking. He stepped forward, unwillingly pulled into the fray. "Victoria, can it wait?" Her eyes met his, a clear, unwavering gaze that held a history yet to be divulged, a past that whispered of silver spoons now tarnished. "No, Mr. Harris. It can't." The standoff, brief as it was, tore the veil off the delicate balance they all precariously maintained. It wasn't just about a glass or a busy night. It was the relentless push and pull of expectation and reality, the silent acknowledgement that each one of them carried battles unseen and stories untold. "Fine," Mr. Harris conceded, the word tasting like ash. He plucked the glass from Victoria's hand and replaced it himself, his movements sharp and decisive, a stark contrast to the languid droop of his shoulders once he turned away. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," she said, her gratitude genuine yet laced with the bitterness of the unsaid. She returned to her domain of steam and suds, the sentinel of sanitation in a world of grime and grease. Justin watched their exchange, the lines around his eyes deepening. He knew the cost of such confrontations, the tax on an already burdened soul. But he held his tongue, the unspoken truths fermenting like the fine wines that lined the shelves behind him. In the refugee of his office, Mr. Harris allowed himself a moment of reprieve. The walls, adorned with accolades and glowing reviews, felt more like a mausoleum than a testament to success. In this quiet corner, his thoughts drifted to a time before the weight of expectation, to the simplicity of dreams undiluted by reality. "Another night," he muttered to himself, the words a mantra to keep the tides of doubt at bay. But the echo of his own voice served only to amplify the emptiness, the sense of something lost amidst the pursuit of something lost amidst the pursuit of something never quite attained. The chime of his phone cut through the stillness of the office, a sharp reminder that the world outside his four walls persisted with or without him. Mr. Harris glanced at the glowing screen, the name Jessica illuminating the dim room in an accusatory blue. "Late again." Her voice crackled through the speaker, a cocktail of disappointment and expectation. He could picture her at their dining table, set for two yet occupied by one, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows over untouched silverware. "Something came up," he replied, the words tasting stale on his tongue, a flavor he'd grown accustomed to. A sigh slipped through the line, almost imperceptible, but laden with a history of similar evenings. "Work always does," Jessica said. And in those three words, he heard the chasm widening between them, an abyss filled with unmet plans and fading photographs of happier times. "Jess, He started, But what was there to say? That he yearned for her company, for the intimacy they once shared, now eroded by a relentless tide of obligations. "Save it, Harris," she interrupted, her use of his surname a barometer of her discontent. "The roast is cold, and so is the bed. Don't bother rushing." The call ended with a click, as if the finality of their conversation had been preordained. Mr. Harris sat motionless, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen seeping into his office, a constant reminder of the life throbbing just beyond his reach. He stood slowly, his reflection in the window pane a ghost against the night. The restaurant, once a beacon of their mutual ambition, now felt like the very thing that tethered him to solitude. The irony was not lost on him. Success had come at the cost of the very happiness it was meant to secure. "Another late night, Mr. Harris." Justin's voice floated from the doorway, tinged with concern that stretched beyond the professional. "Seems so," Mr. Harris responded, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside, where the city's pulse continued unabated. He wondered if Jessica, too, stared out into the void, pondering the distance between them. "Take care of yourself," Justin advised, before retreating, leaving Mr. Harris alone once more with the echo of his wife's words and the quiet judgment of his own reflection. Mr. Harris ran a hand through his thinning hair, the silver at his temples catching the faint light from the bar's overhead lamps. As he glanced at his reflection in the mirrored backdrop lined with liquor bottles, the furrows on his brow seemed more pronounced, as did the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked every bit the part of a man who had traded sleep for ledger sheets and love letters for supplier contracts. "Another whiskey, boss?" Justin asked from behind the bar, his tone casual but carrying the weight of observation. "Water," Mr. Harris murmured, his voice barely traveling over the clink of glassware being stacked by Victoria. He turned away from his reflection, considering the irony of seeking clarity in a glass devoid of spirits, thinking of taking some time off. It was not Justin's question that surprised him, but rather the earnestness that laced it. Perhaps. The word hung between them, an admission of vulnerability Mr. Harris seldom allowed himself. A vacation might bring some perspective, or just prove how much you're needed here, Justin countered with a half-smile that failed to mask his concern. Maybe so. Mr. Harris's gaze shifted towards Victoria, who scrubbed at a stubborn stain on a wineglass. The determination etched into her features sparked an idea, one that carried a tinge of malice he couldn't quite suppress. "Victoria," he called out, his voice carrying an edge that caused her to pause, her hand stilling around the glass. "I have a wager for you." She set down the wineglass, turning to face him with a wary expression. "I bet you can't keep every glass spotless on a Friday night rush." His challenge was a test, a gauntlet thrown down to disrupt the rhythm she'd found within his walls. "And if I win?" There was steel in her voice, a hint of the hidden depths he had come to recognize in her. "Then I'll consider your proposal for the new dishwashing system." Mr. Harris watched as Justin's look of unease deepened. "Seems unfair," Justin interjected, his fingers tightening around a dish rag. "She's one person against a tide." "Life's unfair," Mr. Harris retorted sharply, the melancholy momentarily overtaken by the thrill of the game. "But fine. If she wins, you both get a bonus." Victoria nodded, accepting the gauntlet with a quiet confidence that belied her role as a mere dishwasher. Justin, however, wore his disapproval openly, a testament to the values he held dear. "Game on, Mr. Harris," Victoria said, her voice steady, yet there was something that flashed in her eyes, a challenge of her own. As Mr. Harris retreated back into the shadows of his office, the reflection of the bustling restaurant dimmed on the polished surface of his desk. The wager, a diversion from his troubled thoughts, now seemed like another misstep in a dance he no longer enjoyed. He sank into his chair, the leather cold against his back, and wondered if any destination could distance him from the discontentment that had quietly woven itself into the fabric of his life. The evening had worn on, the restaurant's lights dimming to mimic the setting sun, casting long shadows over the once crowded space now dwindling with patrons. Mr. Harris stood by the bar, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the polished countertop, each tap echoing the thrumming headache that had taken residence behind his eyes. Justin, leaning against the bar, wiped down the last of the glasses with a practiced motion that seemed too serene for the storm brewing in the air. "It's not right," he muttered, the words barely reaching Mr. Harris, spoken more to the glass than anyone else. "Excuse me." Mr. Harris's voice cut through the murmur of departing guests, sharp as the knives neatly aligned in the kitchen. "To fire her just like that," Justin said, straightening up. "Your job was simple." Mr. Harris's tone did not rise, but it chilled the air nonetheless, a task you chose to ignore, because it's unjust. "Justice," Mr. Harris scoffed, the word tasting sour on his tongue. "This is about order, about what's necessary for the business, even at the expense of people, especially then." Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer. "You're too much like her. Idealistic, naive. Better than being ruthless." A silence fell, punctuated only by the clinking of forks and knives being counted for tomorrow's service. Mr. Harris's hand ceased its drumming, coming to rest flat against the cold stone. "If you cannot follow my direction," he began, his voice low, "then I have no use for you here." "Are you?" Justin's voice faltered, disbelief etched into his features. "Are you firing me?" "Consider it a lesson," Mr. Harris replied, his detachment a facade that might fool others, but not himself. The scent of disinfectant from the freshly mopped floors stung his nostrils, as if cleansing away the remnants of his decision. "Fine," Justin said, tossing the dish rag onto the counter with a finality that resonated louder than any slam door. "I'll go, but remember this. You're the one losing, not me." As Justin strode past him, Mr. Harris remained still, staring at the abandoned dish rag like it was a white flag in a battle he had unwittingly waged upon himself. The reflection in the mirror behind the bar showed a man hunched with the weight of his choices, a man who could no longer recognize the cost of his victories. The restaurant door closed with a soft click, severing Justin from the world Mr. Harris had created, one that suddenly felt as empty as the hollow clink of ice settling in a glass left behind on the bar. Victoria plunged her hands into the basin, the warm suds a stark contrast to the cold reality of her reflection in the stainless steel. Scrubbing at a stubborn wine stain on a crystal glass, she found herself tracing the contours of her memory as much as the rim of the stemware. "Thought you'd be done by now." Justin's voice floated over, not unkindly, from the bar where he was restocking the top shelf whiskey. "Time has little respect for one's expectations," Victoria responded, her words carrying a weight that was incongruent with her station among the sinks and drying racks. Justin paused, a bottle of aged bourbon in hand, and regarded her with a curiosity that seemed to stretch beyond the bounds of casual workplace chatter. "You've got a way with words, Victoria. Not what you'd expect from a dishwasher?" She interjected with a slight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Yes. I suppose narratives have a habit of simplifying characters." "Exactly," Justin said slowly, as if testing the word against his understanding of her. The restaurant hummed around them, a symphony of clinking cutlery and hushed conversations, a world away from the galas and grand halls that once echoed with the sound of Victoria's laughter and the rustle of silk gowns. She remembered the intoxicating blend of arrogance and adoration that had pervaded those nights, now replaced by the acrid scent of cleaning agents and the anonymity of a uniform. "Your family must miss you," one of the servers remarked, passing by with a stack of plates. Victoria fixed her gaze on the drain, watching the murky water swirl away remnants of meals she once would have dined upon rather than disposed of. "Some absences are more keenly felt than others," she said, her tone betraying nothing of the chasm that yawned within her at the thought of her estranged kin. "Did I hear right that you're from Wellingford Heights?" Another server piped up, curiosity piqued. It was that affluent enclave, shrouded as much in opulence as it was in secrecy, which had long been whispered about among the staff. "Once," she admitted quietly, a single word laden with the gravity of loss and disinheritance. Her fingers momentarily ceased their motion, lingering on the glass like a pianist's on the last note of a somber sonata. Then why here? Why this? The question hung in the air, pointed and yet not impertinent, for it was the same inquiry that reverberated through the hollows of her own mind each day. Life is an unexpected chef, Victoria mused, her lips curving with a wry self-awareness. It serves up courses you never ordered. And sometimes you discover that what nourishes you isn't the richness of the banquet, but the bread earned by your own hands. Poetic, Justin acknowledged, leaning against the bar with the bourbon back in its place, his eyes tracing the outline of her profile. Reality often is, she replied, finally offering a genuine smile, albeit tinged with melancholy, especially when viewed through the prism of hindsight. As she turned back to her task, the last of the light from the setting sun caught the facets of the crystal, casting prismatic shadows that danced across her features, whispered reminders of a past both luminous and shattered. In the whispers of steam and the quietude of her toil, Victoria was sculpting a future from the shards of her fall from grace, one sparkling clean plate at a time. The clink of porcelain against stainless steel punctuated the silence of the kitchen as Victoria scrubbed with a rhythmic determination. Her hands, submerged in soapy water, betrayed no sign of the life of luxury they had once known. It was an ordinary day until the sharp bite of raised voices sliced through the air, shattering the calm like a dropped plate. "Enough with the charade, Victoria," sneered Marianne from the line, her voice laced with venom. The sous chef's eyes were narrow slits of malice, and her stance spoke of confrontation. "We all know you're not one of us. Just a washed-up heiress playing pauper." The restaurant staff froze, tension coiling around them like steam from the simmering pots. Victoria straightened up, her spine rigid, yet her voice was steady, resonating with a quiet strength. "Is it the truth you want, Marianne?" Victoria asked, locking eyes with her aggressor. The room held its breath. "Yes, I come from money, but wealth is a fickle companion. It left me without a farewell." "Then spill it," Marianne said, arms folded, a smirk blooming on her face. "Tell us about the fall. Was it drugs, gambling, or did Daddy Dearest cut you off?" "None of those." Victoria's gaze didn't waver. "My family, they were involved in less than savory business deals. When it all came to light, I chose to step away, to build something of my own, even if it means starting from the bottom." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victoria's admission hung heavy in the air, a confession that bore the weight of 1,000 wash cycles. "Enough." The booming voice of Mr. Harris echoed through the kitchen. He moved towards Victoria, his expression a complex tapestry of regret and resolve. The staff parted for him, their whispers falling silent. "Victoria, I apologize." For all of this, he gestured broadly, encompassing the tension, the harsh words, the environment he had allowed to fester. "I've been blind, preoccupied with my own troubles. My wife. She has betrayed me, entangled our business in criminal activities. I'm clearing house, in every sense." He stood before her, an island of sincerity in a sea of skepticism. "What I need now, more than ever, is someone I can trust, someone with integrity and strength. I'd be honored if you'd consider a managerial position here to help right the ship." The offer hovered between them, like a delicate souffle on the brink of collapse. Victoria's heart thrummed a complex rhythm of hope and apprehension. She regarded Mr. Harris, a man frayed at the edges by personal battles and professional storms. "Mr. Harris," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, yet every ear strained to catch her words. "I accept, not for the title or redemption, but for a chance to forge a path where honesty is the cornerstone, not an afterthought." In that moment, Amidst the stainless steel and ceramic, beneath the humming fluorescence, Victoria's transformation was palpable. From the ashes of her past, she stepped into a new role, not just in title, but in spirit, ready to stir change into the recipe of the restaurant's future. Victoria's first day in her managerial role was marked by the scent of polished wood and the low murmur of a restaurant reborn. She brushed a hand against the mahogany bar, her fingers tracing the lines of new responsibility etched into its surface. The atmosphere hummed with a cautious optimism, as if the establishment itself exhaled years of tension with every clink of glassware and sizzle from the kitchen. "Looking sharp, boss lady," Justin said, emerging from the dim backdrop of the storeroom, his voice laced with a playful reverence that belied the gravity of recent events. "Strange, isn't it?" Victoria mused, turning to face him. Her eyes, usually pools of composure, rippled with the uncertainty of change. To stand here, not just as a spectator of chaos, but as someone expected to tame it. "Change suits you," he replied, leaning on the bar, the distance between them charged with an unspoken connection. Their bond had deepened beyond casual camaraderie, woven from shared struggles and secrets unveiled. It was a tapestry rich with complexity, each thread a story of resilience and reinvention. Speaking of change, his gaze shifted towards the entrance where Mr. Harris stood, awkwardly adjusting his tie, a man whose armor of infallibility had been irrevocably dented. "Justin!" Mr. Harris called out, his voice shaky, betraying the vulnerability of reconciliation. "I've missed you at the bar. Your place is here, not just as my son, but as a pillar of this establishment." A moment suspended, as if the very air held its breath, before Justin crossed the divide, his handshake with Mr. Harris sealing the silent pact of forgiveness. "Let's make this place what it should have always been," Justin said, a determined glint in his eyes, mirroring the resolve in Victoria's own. Mr. Harris nodded, a gesture laden with humility, and retreated to allow them their space, understanding the subtle shift in the restaurant's hierarchy. "Victoria," Justin continued once, his father faded into the background, his words tentative as he reached for her hand. "There's something else I need to say. Something more personal." Her pulse quickened at the touch, warmth spreading up her arm like the gentle flare of a candle in twilight's embrace. She met his gaze, a silent invitation to continue. "Through all the mess, the one clear thing has been you. You're the clarity in the chaos," he confessed, his voice a blend of strength and softness. "And I think I'm falling for you." The revelation hung between them, a fragile truth waiting to be cradled or shattered. Victoria hesitated, her heart a tempestuous sea, thoughts adrift in the surging tide of possibility. "I never allowed myself the luxury of such feelings. Not after everything." "Neither did I," he interjected gently. "But maybe we've earned the chance to try." In the quiet aftermath of confessions, they stood together, two souls entwined by the promise of something more than just survival. It was a delicate dance of hope against the backdrop of a world often too harsh, too unforgiving. "Let's take it one day at a time," she whispered, a decision made not from the lofty heights of fantasy, but from the solid ground of mutual respect and burgeoning affection. "Agreed," he said, his thumb caressing the back of her hand, a simple act that spoke volumes. The restaurant buzzed around them, oblivious to the silent currents shifting beneath the surface. Yet for Victoria and Justin, each glance, each task ahead imbued with the weight of new beginnings. The world narrowed to the space they shared, a space where the future was unwritten and every choice was theirs to make. The evening waned, the restaurant's bustle simmering down to a languid pace. Victoria wiped down the countertops with a methodical grace, her movements a silent testament to the sea change within. The stainless steel gleamed under her touch, reflecting not just the overhead lights, but also the fragments of a life pieced back together in this sanctuary of scents and flavors. Closing time feels more like a beginning than an end, doesn't it? Justin mused from behind the bar, where the last glasses clinked into their rightful places. "Every night," she agreed, her voice soft as the fading light. "A quiet moment to collect our thoughts. A pause between what has been and what's yet to come." He nodded, his face half-shadowed, half illuminated by the warm glow of pendant lamps. "We've both walked long roads to get here. I can hardly believe this is where they've led. Sometimes the longest journeys," Victoria began, trailing off as her gaze settled on a crack in one of the floor tiles. "A flaw amidst perfection. They bring us to the places we never knew we needed to be. Redemption," he said thoughtfully, polishing a glass to a shine that rivaled the stars outside. "It's not just about making amends. It's finding the strength to build anew from the rubble of our past mistakes. Resilience," she countered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the weight of her history momentarily dimming the spark within. "It's the courage to stand tall when every fiber of your being urges you to crumble. Second chances," he concluded, setting the glass aside and meeting her gaze with an earnestness that tethered her to the present. "They're rare, precious, like finding harbor after a tempest. Or like trust," Victoria added, her hand stilling on the counter. "Once broken, you wonder if it'll ever hold the same again. But here we are, learning to mend it piece by piece." "Here we are," Justin echoed, his tone imbued with a hope that seemed almost audacious amidst the remnants of a day's hard labor. "Tomorrow will be different," she said, not as a question, but as a certainty carved from the bedrock of their shared experiences. "Better," he affirmed, his hand reaching across the bar to briefly cover hers, a fleeting connection that bridged the distance of their separate solitudes. Victoria turned off the faucet, the water's flow ceasing with a finality that felt symbolic. She dried her hands and faced Justin, her silhouette etched against the kitchen's dimming lights. "Let's promise each other something," she ventured, her voice no more than a whisper carried on the wings of dusk. "Anything," he replied, his stance open and expectant. "Let's promise to never forget the lessons hidden in the hardships we've overcome. Let's embrace this chance, not just to survive, but to truly live." "Agreed," Justin said, the word a pact sealed in the quiet understanding that only those who have tasted despair can truly savor the sweetness of hope reborn. As they stepped out into the cool embrace of the night, the restaurant's door closing behind them with a gentle click, the world seemed infinite, rich with the potential of unwritten tomorrows. And for a brief, transcendent moment, the future was not a specter to be feared, but a canvas awaiting the bold strokes of their renewed dreams.